Hi, I'm Paul Gill and you're very welcome to today's video. I'm a hypnotherapist, I'm a psychotherapist and psychoanalyst. What I do is I deliver intervention techniques into the subconscious mind through the medium of hypnosis or trance. Hypnosis and trance are very natural states of mind to be in. Many of you have experienced that daydreaming feeling, especially where you're doing a mundane task and your mind is off thinking about something else, or if you're driving from A to B and your mind is not on the road, you find yourself coming into a particular town or city and you realize, I don't remember anything about the journey. Part of you has been driving the vehicle, part of you has been off thinking, daydreaming about something else. So I deliver intervention, psychotherapy intervention, deep into the subconscious mind through the use of hypnosis. But I want to tell you a little bit, first of all, about my experience of shift work, because I wasn't always a psychotherapist or hypnotherapist. I started my first proper job way back in 1979, working for Telecom Éireann, who've since become Aircom. And it was in one of those old-fashioned switchboards, where if you wanted to ring even your neighbour, you had to press a button or wind a handle on the phone, and you got through to the operator, who had to plug a cord into one part of a switchboard and the opposite end of the cord into another corresponding number. Well, that was me. I was the operator. And I got that job because I was working for the local postmaster and he was looking to get off a couple of hours in the evening and I would sit in and do that job. But it so happened that I was still going to school at the time. I was still in secondary school. And Telecom Éireann took over that particular switchboard and they introduced a night shift, an all-night shift. And I was glad of the money, glad to have a job while I was going to school, had more money than any of my peers in school. So I naturally signed up for the night shift, persuading my parents that yes, I could do this. Maybe I'd get a couple of hours sleep if it wasn't particularly busy and I'd be able to handle school. And besides, it was only one night during the week and then a night at weekends as well. But the switchboard was all well and good because I'd start at maybe 8 o'clock in the evening. And by 12 o'clock at midnight, it had pretty much calmed down. It would be quiet. And in fact, some nights you could get no activity right through from, say, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, right through until 6 or 7 in the morning when businesses started to ring each other. But, if there was a car accident or somebody going to hospital or somebody having a baby, then you could be awake all night. And I would leave the job at 8 o'clock in the morning, step out the front door. My younger brother, would meet me at the bus stop where I was going to school, give me my bag, my lunch, my sandwiches, my flask, and off I go to school. And that was okay, certainly for the first part of the day. But in the afternoon, I started to flag. I started to lose energy. And in fact, I started to fall asleep in class. It was absolutely crazy when I look back at it, to have a schoolboy doing night shift and still going to school. But after I left that job, I just moved seamlessly into working with Pulse because the two companies were kind of linked together at the hip back then. And I ended up working as a postman in Galway over 30 years ago. And again, my first day in that job, it was great. I started at 10:30 in the morning. I was in the main office. I was being shown around, shown little things what to do. And at the end of the day, one of the guys asked me, well, what shift, what duty are you on tomorrow? And I said, I don't know. And he said, we'll have a look at the roster up here. And I looked and I saw that I was starting on a bicycle post at 6 o'clock in the morning. That was quite early. I'm not really a morning person. But I found that I had to get up around 4 or half 4 to have my breakfast, to shower, to cycle into work and be in there on time. And that really, really didn't suit me because around 4 o'clock in the morning, the natural sleep cycle, around 4 o'clock in the morning, you're at a particularly low ebb. Your body is healing itself. Your mind is healing itself. You're at a very low ebb. So to wake up out of that low ebb is very contradictory to nature, and it really doesn't suit. So I found that I was constantly tired in that job. I lost a lot of weight. I was under a lot of pressure, especially there was a lot of unrest in the post office back then. We were on strike many times. I think I was on strike 7 times in the couple of years that I was there. But sometimes I had to do night shift as well. And that was a big ask on the system because, trying to get used to starting work at 6 in the morning was okay. But then going to nights and trying to think, well, what do I do when I go home off nights? Do I go to bed? Do I eat something? What will I do? And I found that I would probably eat something small, go to bed, toss and turn, not be able to sleep properly. Even when I would get up, I wouldn't have had the 7 or 8 hours sleep. I would maybe try to eat a dinner, but that would make me even more sluggish. and tired, and it really didn't suit me. So I remember asking the boss, my supervisor, for a different shift, and I got one that started at 7 in the morning and ended around 2 o'clock or half two, from what I remember, and that was better. That was a whole lot better. But there again, I felt in the afternoon when I'd finished, like, what could I do? Because most of my colleagues were in other jobs, office jobs, factory jobs, where maybe they weren't finished till 5 o'clock. So I was kind of at a loose end. So that kind of work really didn't suit me, and it had an enormous impact on my body and my mind. So if you were to look at for signs of stress in your job, are you suffering from stress? Here are a couple of things that you need to watch out for. And the first one is irritability. Have you got a short fuse? Is your patience tested by people that normally you would be able to tolerate? That's one of the things. Are you snappy at people when you get home? People ask you to do things. Are you grumpy? And, everybody can have their grumpy days, but if it's something that's kind of prolonged or something that's ongoing, then that is definitely a sign of stress from the workplace. The second thing then is inability to make a decision. Now, we all know people whom, if you ask them to do one cup of tea, a cup of coffee, they spend ages trying to make up their minds. But if you're normally the kind of person who can make everyday decisions pretty okay, but you find yourself then putting off decisions or not being able to concentrate on the information available to make the proper decision, then that too is a sign of stress, and you need to do something about it. And what you can do about it, I'll come to just in a little while. Another thing then that you need to watch out for is memory loss. And it's memory loss. So when people say, I get a bad memory as I grow older, I can't remember things. And that can be true. It can be degeneration within the brain. But if you are, in middle years or even younger, you shouldn't have that degeneration. But in your case, it's probably not memory loss. It's that you don't concentrate enough to memorize what it is that you need to remember in the first place. You don't put that thing into your head in order to retrieve it back out of your head. And that comes down to lack of concentration. And the lack of concentration is through fatigue or tiredness. The next thing you'd have to watch out for is sluggishness, lack of energy. That feeling that when you get home is just easier just to lie out on the couch, flick on the telly, when really there's a little voice in your head saying you need to get up, get out, walk the dog, go for a jog, go to the gym, swim in the pool. But there's another voice that's stronger in your head and says, look, I'm just too tired. Now, many of you, your jobs will be maybe mentally taxing. It's not necessarily that you will be lifting around big heavy furniture or workloads like that. So the tiredness that's on you when you get home off your shift is more likely to be mental fatigue rather than physical fatigue. Of course, you can have physical fatigue from lack of sleep, but it's more likely to be mental. And what you say to yourself in your head is true. If you persuade yourself that you are in fact tired and you're not able to get out and exercise, then that becomes true for you. But what if somebody at that moment rushed in the door and said, hey, you're after winning the lotto, you've won 20 million. Straight away, you would be up off the couch, you'd probably be doing cartwheels, you'd be running down the street. Where would you have got that abundance of energy from? That's the mind. I first discovered this when I was running marathons. I was the youngest person, I think, in Ireland, back when I was 16, to run the first Dublin City Marathon. I had to get permission off my parents. And I remember training for the marathon with a group of lads, and some of the older lads said, well, look, we'll be fine. We can run a bit, we can walk a bit. I think 10 miles was the furthest I'd ever run in training. So on the day of the marathon, we were all enthused up. There was 8,000 people in the race that first year. And it was a great atmosphere. We found ourselves on the line and the gun goes off and we surged forward and it was great. We were laughing, joking, chatting as we were going along. And that was well and good until some person, I was going to call him a derogatory name there, but until one particular person pointed at a sign up on a telegraph pole that said 18 miles. We had run 18 miles without realising it. And I thought, oh my God, this is almost twice as far as I've ever run before. I should be tired. And no sooner had I thought the thought, then I became overwhelmed with tiredness. I started to flag. I started to lose touch with the others. The group that we were in broke up. We fragmented. Some of them gave up. I saw grown men sitting on the side of the road, sobbing, crying. They were physically, emotionally exhausted. And I had made a decision that, do you know what, when I get to the next water station, I know there'll be an ambulance there that can take me back to the finish line, to the start line, and I can go home. I'm not able for this. And to add insult to injury, just as I was about to come up to that water station, there was this little old man. I found out subsequently that he was 76. I still see him in my mind. Little green togs, vest, singlet, even green runners. And he just kind of plodded past me. There was me, like a healthy 16-year-old, full of vitality. Well, I was supposed to be full of vitality, being passed by this 76-year-old man. So it was really a slap in the face. And I said, that's it. That's it. I'm giving up the next water station. But as I was coming up to that water station closer, there was a radio station, 2FM, were having an outdoor broadcast, and they were blaring out through the speakers this music, and it was Neil Diamond. What a wonderful noise. It was blaring out through the speakers, and it was very uplifting. And then there was this dub fella standing in the middle of the road saying, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And I went from being bent over, about to collapse on the road, to suddenly chest out and powering up the road, running as if somebody put a rocket up my backside, straight through the water station, out the far side, and I'm running good out for Ireland. And then suddenly I realised something. I'd forgotten to stop. I'd forgotten to give up. And I thought, where did this energy come from? A moment ago, my body was ready to collapse. And now, had I taken any water at the water station, I would have thought there's something in the water. But I didn't. I didn't take anything extra into my body to change how my energy level. So where did it come from? Well, it came from in here. It came from my attitude. I changed my attitude, and in an instant, I had an abundance of energy. And that was, if you like, that was my first introduction to hypnosis at 16. I thought, if I could bottle this, if I could switch this on at will, this would be a tremendous tool. So that was my starting point. The next thing you need to watch out for is aches and pains that defy explanation. Now, if you have an ache or a pain that kind of prolonged, you will probably end up at your doctors, your GPs, and they do what they do. They kind of look at you and kind of think, well, we'll give you painkillers or we'll give you some rub for it. They treat the symptom, and in fairness, that's all they have time to do. Or maybe you might even go to a physio or massage therapist, and they can do a little more because they'll investigate why it is that you have this. But one of the first things they should ask you is, what kind of stress levels are you experiencing at the moment? Because aches and pains come about in the body because of tension in the muscles. Our bodies are mostly made of water. We're 90% water when we're born as newborn babies, but we lose a certain amount of water as we get older, and by the time we die, we're probably 60 to 70% water. And most of us don't drink enough water. We are supposed to drink up to 2 litres of water a day, even more if you're exercising, but we don't. And maybe some of us, it's because of the climate we live in, and it's cold. If you drink lots of water, you might be running to the loo, or excuse me, or we drink tea or coffee and we think that compensates. Well, it doesn't, because tea and coffee is a diuretic and you lose water that way too. And a lot of illnesses, a lot of maladies that we suffer can be simply cured by drinking your quota of water. And I don't mean like tap water. I'm not a fan of tap water because of fluoridation of the water. Even bottled water is dead water. It's on the shelves in supermarkets. If you can get natural spring water out of a natural spring that you know is good, you know it's good if lots of people in the community are using it and nobody's got sick. Or even the second thing is Kangen water. If you Google Kangen water, or even if you want to get back to me, I know somebody who does this kind of water. Kangen water, what it does is it puts back into water what the fluoridation process takes out. It puts back oxygen into water. It treats it with an electrical current, is my understanding of it. And the water is quite good, and there's a lot of anecdotal information out there online about people who've cured all kinds of things, such as skin ailments and even digestive problems with this Kangen water. And talking about problems of the gut, again, if you have constipation or bloating or diarrhea, you'll tolerate it for a while, and then you'll end up back at your GP and he'll give you something to stop that. But all of those things are symptoms in the body. And as well, it's all well and good treating the symptoms, but it's crazy long term, because if you're driving your car and the oil light comes on in the dashboard and you get a bit of sticky tape and you put it over the light so that you can no longer see the light doesn't show red anymore, you can think that's fixed. There's no red light anymore. But you've only treated the symptom. And what happens is, if you continue to drive a week or two down the way, you'll have even bigger problems in the engine to sort. So I'm a fan of, yes, go to your GP for a supportive call, but also find out what the root cause is. If your bowel is acting up, there is a reason for it. The ancient Greeks used to believe that the mind was in the gut, in the bowel. The Romans believed it was in the heart. Now, if you think of it, your gut, the texture of your gut, the colon, the intestines, looks crinkly. It looks like that crinkly brain matter that we have in here. It's a curious thing, isn't it? The two of them look the same. Modern medicine has discovered that there are neurotransmitters that exist in the brain and in the gut, and they talk to each other. So your gut actually does contain part of your mind. And the Romans weren't too far off either, because they've also found out that the heart does much more than just simply pump blood around the body, that it actually is highly involved with the brain in thinking. And this is where we get expressions such as gut feeling or heartfelt feelings as well. So if your bowels are acting up, it can be a sign of stress. Another sign of stress is where we resort to drinking more, drinking alcohol, or maybe smoking, whether it's regular cigarettes or whether it's other kinds of stuff as well, even recreational drugs. It's okay to drink. I wouldn't say it's okay to smoke, because smoking doesn't, even one cigarette does harm to your body, whereas a little amount of alcohol can actually be a benefit to your body. But if you've got an over dependency on it, you know the kind of thing that I mean. Like if you go out for a drink or two at the weekend, that's fine. Or if you have a glass of wine at home 1 or 2 nights during the week. But if you find that every night you need a couple of cans of beer or you need a couple of glasses of wine maybe to get you to sleep, that is a sign of a problem. And you need to nip that in the bud, because long term, this dependency, while it might get you off to sleep at night, you wake up the next morning groggy, swearing that you'll never do it again, and then the next night you're back to square one, finding yourself sitting down maybe in front of the telly, just doping yourself with alcohol or smoking something. And then another sign of stress or anxiety in the workplace is frequently getting colds or flus. Now, while everybody can get a cold or flu maybe once or twice a year, you do know people who don't get colds and flus. In fact, I'm one of those people. I don't get colds or flus. In fact, I seldom ever get sick. And part of the reason for that is because of the amount of work I've done on myself, on my mind over the years. I can spot things. And there's a thing called psychosomatic illness, which talks about the fact that your mind can make the body sick. And I'll give you an example of how the mind affects the body. It's a quite simple example, and you'll all know what I'm talking about. If you remember back to when you were a child, and maybe you were in a darkened room, or maybe you were in a tent somewhere, and there's some older kid, and that older kid had a flashlight under his face, and he was telling a ghost story, and he was telling it really, really well. Well, what happened to you? What happened to your body? Well, you got goosebumps all up your arms. Maybe the hair in the back of your neck stood up. Why? It's not as if the place suddenly got colder. It's because your body's having a physiological reaction to a psychological input. Your mind, what it is that you're thinking about, is having an effect on your body. Now that happens 24/7. It happens all the time. And another example, a psychologist friend of mine, who back during, I think it was the 1960s in the Congo, he was working for a UK firm at the time, but one of his briefs was to test how the body could cope with pain. And he told me this completely off the record, that sometimes they would get people who had broken legs or broken ankles to walk on them, to test how far they could go, how they could tolerate pain, or how the body could wipe out pain, just forget about pain, and let the adrenaline kick in and just walk. But he told me on another occasion that they came back to a particular village, and there was a young guide who'd escorted them back to the village, and when they got there, a rival tribe had been in and they had slaughtered everybody. They'd gone in with machetes, knives, and they'd hacked bodies to bits. There was women, children, all dead, slaughtered all over the place. And this guy's entire community was wiped out. And he sat under a tree and started to sob and weep. And 30 minutes later, he was dead. He died of profound sadness. Physically, 30 minutes before, he was healthy in body, but his mind killed him. Now that's an extreme example, but if you're susceptible to extra colds and flus, that can be a sign of stress. Another obvious sign of stress is high blood pressure, and that can be easily ascertained by getting it monitored. Now high blood pressure, the reason for it is that if you can imagine a garden hose left out during the winter, during the frost, and what happens is it freezes. Now if you run water through that hose the next morning, the water comes out the opposite end really, really fast. Really, really strong. And it's because the hose has lost its flexibility. There's no give in the hose. Your arteries are exactly like that. As we age, as we neglect our bodies, maybe through bad diet, maybe through alcohol or smoking or lack of exercise, our arteries will start to harden and they'll start to narrow then as plaque starts to build up in the arteries and the blood has less room to get through, so it'll cause more pressure in the system. And more pressure in the system then can lead to heart disease or even stroke. So blood pressure, there are several ways and means of reducing blood pressure. There's the medical intervention, you can take drugs, but there's practical things such as tweaking your diet and exercising. Another thing then that you need to watch out for is sleep disturbance. So the sleep disturbance can be where you can't get to sleep at night. You feel tired, but as soon as you go to bed, sleep evades you. You're just lying there looking at the ceiling hours later. Or it can be that you do get to sleep and then you wake up several times at night, so you're twisting or turning. Or even when you do get to sleep, that you're dreaming huge amounts. And dreaming is something that I specialize in. But you're dreaming huge amounts and the sleep is disturbed. And when you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like you're getting up. You can get up. You kill for an extra hour in bed. So when I ask people about their dreams, it's natural to dream 5-6 times at night. It's not really common that people would remember them. I can actually remember every dream that I have because I've trained myself to do it, and I can analyze a dream while I'm having the dream, and I can even have a second or third dream kicking off. But most people might remember 1 or 2 dreams during the night, and that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to be. But if you feel in the morning when you wake up that you haven't had enough sleep, that you need more, then that's a sign of stress in the system. And again, that can be dealt with by looking at how it is that you cope with stress. What kind of coping mechanisms do you have? I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a little while. Another thing you need to watch out for in both men and women is hair loss. Now, it's natural to lose some hair. I mean, I've lost hair as I got older. But if you start losing hair abruptly, suddenly, if you notice extra amounts of hair in the shower or when you comb your hair, brush your hair, as a woman, you probably notice this even more so. Alopecia. The root cause of alopecia is stress. So you can get all kinds of creams and medication that can help you slow down the process. But really you need to deal with your stress. It's the root cause. And again, that's something that I help people deal with. Now, naturally, if you're not feeling up to par, if you're feeling lack of energy, you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be inclined to go out, to socialize. So withdrawal from social activity is another sign of anxiety and stress in the workplace. When it's easier to just say, do you know what, I'm just going to sit in with a couple of beers on the couch and I'm not bothered to get dressed up to go down to the pub or go to another social event, play the theatre or anything like that, or even family events where you withdraw from that and you kind of think, well, I just can't stand those people, or I just, I wouldn't be good company for those people. That's a sign that you're overwhelmed, that your mind is overwhelmed. So loss of interest in that. And then loss of interest too in sex, low libido or loss of libido. Now, libido, the original meaning of libido is much greater than sex. It actually means your life force, your life energy. But since all of us are here because of sex, there's not one of us that were born into this world through any other means. Sexual energy is a good barometer of how it is that you are, healthy mind and body. So if you find the lack of interest in sex, or you're just kind of going off, or maybe you think things have gone stale with your partner, it can be relationship issues, but it can also be that you are suffering the effects of stress and anxiety. And again, that can be treated. You don't have to live with that. It can be treated. And then finally, probably one of the more obvious signs of stress is fluctuations in weight. Now, whether that's weight loss or weight gain. For me, when I was on shift work, it was weight loss because I simply wasn't eating correctly and I was working huge hours, and sometimes I would double shift. I could be going, there was one particular time I didn't sleep for 72 hours. I did 3 shifts in a row and I was actually hallucinating by the end of it. It was really detrimental to my health. But sometimes people will start putting on weight, and that means that their metabolism, their metabolic rate has slowed down and the body can't efficiently break down the food that they're feeding themselves, and it's holding it as weight. Again, that can be addressed. And one of the things I find when helping people who are dealing with depression especially is that their diet is very bad. You know that guy who did Super Size Me, where I think he spent 30 days living on junk food, and at the end of it, he was almost suicidal. He was in a really bad spot, physically and emotionally. Now, junk food or even processed food contains an enormous amount of additives and preservatives that the human body is not meant to break down or digest. Even my own father was remarking one week, he said, if you get an apple, or sorry, not an apple, it was a tomato. He said, you get a tomato these days in the supermarket and you put it on the shelf, it's in pristine condition a week or two later. And he grows his own tomatoes in the greenhouse. If he brings in one of the ones that he grows, he puts it on the windowsill. even within 24 hours, that start to degrade, started to break down. And his point was, well, how does our digestive system break down something that doesn't naturally break down in nature? We've had millions of years of evolution where we've learned to eat certain foods and our bodies have learned to cope with them and digest them. And now we're bombarded with all this new processed food that's unnatural to our bodies. So if you've got a bad diet, you're going to hold on weight, you're going to feel heavier, sluggish, you're not going to feel good about yourself, you're not going to feel like exercising. It's a slippery slope. But the good news is that all of these things can be addressed, and sometimes you need a little help. You need to go outside of yourself for just that little help. Go to somebody who can advise you, somebody who can encourage you. So whether that's a dietitian to tweak the diet, or whether it's a personal trainer or somebody that can motivate you in the gym, or even coming along to somebody like me who can have a look at what your coping mechanisms currently are. Because maybe you haven't got any coping mechanisms. It's not something that you learned in school. Nobody sat down and studied in school coping mechanisms, A to Z. We didn't. We just kind of floundered through life. We picked up certain coping mechanisms, maybe from our parents or teachers or other people. But maybe those coping mechanisms aren't effective for who it is that we are now, all these years later. Maybe they need to be re-examined, and maybe some of them need to be dismissed completely and new ones brought in. Now that can be done. But again, you're probably one of the worst people to do it, because you are, if you try to do it by yourself, you are what it is you're trying to examine. You can find it very difficult to get a third-party perspective on yourself. So that's when you come to somebody like me and I get you in an altered state of awareness. You can see facets of yourself that weren't previously obvious. And then you can tweak those facets. The subconscious mind has been likened to a computer. It runs programs. Some of those programs you were born with, those instinctual programs. Others then were installed when you were a child, a baby, again by your parents, your family life, what that was like growing up, then your school, your community, religion. All of these things inputted computer programs like software into your subconscious mind. And the thing is, all these years later, you might still be running Windows 95 and not know it. So you need to seriously upgrade. That's what I help people do. So if you feel that you'd like to talk to me, discuss things further, please contact me at the contact details available with this video. I'm Paul Gill. I'll talk to you soon.